When discussing the long game behind Iraq's currency strategy, it is essential to move away from the idea that currency outcomes are driven by sudden decisions or single events. In modern finance, especially for countries that have experienced prolonged instability, currency strategy becomes a slow, deliberate process shaped by hard-earned lessons. Iraq's economic history over the past 2 decades has exposed the risks of reactive policymaking, weak coordination, and short-term fixes that prioritize urgency over sustainability. These experiences have influenced a noticeable shift in mindset. Rather than treating the currency as a lever to pull for immediate results, Iraqi policymakers increasingly view it as a reflection of broader economic structure, institutional credibility, and long-term stability. This approach mirrors how mature economies manage currency confidence, not through promises, but through consistency. Global investors understand that real currency strength is rarely announced. It is earned through discipline that persists even when conditions are difficult. For Iraq, the long game means focusing first on restoring trust in systems, before expecting trust in value. This involves creating an environment where monetary policy is predictable, fiscal behavior is restrained, and institutional signals are coherent over time. Such changes rarely generate headlines, but they gradually alter how markets interpret risk. Investors who operate on long horizons pay close attention to this phase because it often determines whether future opportunities are viable. The long game also acknowledges that credibility, once damaged, cannot be repaired quickly. It must be rebuilt incrementally, through repeated actions that demonstrate learning and restraint. As Iraq positions itself within a complex global financial environment, its currency strategy reflects an understanding that stability is not a destination but a process. This process prioritizes endurance over speed and structure over speculation, signaling to serious observers that Iraq is no longer focused on forcing outcomes, but on shaping conditions where sustainable outcomes can eventually emerge. A central pillar of the long game behind Iraq's currency strategy is the emphasis on monetary discipline and operational control, elements that global markets consider essential for credibility. Rather than pursuing aggressive or symbolic measures, the focus has increasingly been on maintaining orderly liquidity conditions, improving oversight mechanisms, and ensuring that monetary signals remain consistent over time. For investors, consistency is more valuable than ambition because it allows risk to be measured rather than guessed. Iraq's monetary authorities appear to recognize that confidence in a currency is built quietly through repeated behavior, not through isolated announcements. Managing money supply, coordinating with fiscal authorities, and avoiding policy contradictions are all part of this slow process. These steps may seem technical, but they form the foundation of trust. In environments where past volatility has shaped expectations, even small improvements in predictability can significantly alter market perception. Over time, disciplined monetary management reduces uncertainty premiums and encourages longer-term thinking among investors. This is particularly important for a country transitioning from recovery to normalization, where credibility must be demonstrated rather than declared. The long game, therefore, is not about maximizing short-term advantage, but about minimizing long-term risk. By prioritizing control and coherence, Iraq signals that its currency strategy is aligned with global financial norms, where stability precedes expansion and confidence is earned through patience rather than speed. Another critical dimension of the long game behind Iraq's currency strategy lies in how economic resources, particularly energy revenues, are managed and integrated into the broader financial system. In resource-based economies, currencies are often exposed to volatility, not because of weak income, but because of how that income is handled during different market cycles. Iraq's policymakers have learned that relying on favorable commodity prices without long-term planning creates instability rather than strength. As a result, greater attention is being placed on smoothing fiscal behavior, reinforcing reserve management, and reducing abrupt policy reactions to external price movements. For global investors, this approach matters deeply because currencies tend to reflect resilience more than abundance. When revenue inflows are treated as temporary advantages rather than permanent guarantees, financial systems become more adaptive. Iraq's long-term strategy appears to recognize that a currency cannot gain credibility if it remains vulnerable to every external shock. Instead, the goal is to build buffers, financial, institutional, and operational, that allow the system to absorb pressure without losing direction. Investors do not expect immunity from volatility, but they look for evidence that mechanisms exist to manage it. Over time, improved revenue coordination contributes to steadier expectations, which in turn influence how a currency is assessed. This process is slow and often invisible to the public, but it is central to rebuilding confidence. The long game therefore involves transforming variable income into predictable governance behavior by focusing on how resources support stability rather than excitement. Iraq signals that its currency strategy is rooted in endurance. This signals to serious observers that the emphasis is not on exploiting favorable moments, but on ensuring that the system remains intact during unfavorable ones. Institutional alignment is another defining element of the long game behind Iraq's currency strategy, because no currency can maintain stability without coordination across the broader economic system. Monetary policy does not operate in isolation. It depends on how ministries, regulators, financial institutions, and political authorities interact over time. In the past, fragmented decision-making and inconsistent signals weakened confidence and increased uncertainty. The current approach appears more focused on reducing those gaps by improving communication, clarifying roles, and reinforcing predictable policy behavior. For global investors, this type of alignment is a powerful signal, even when progress is incremental. Markets respond not only to policy outcomes but to the process behind them. When institutions demonstrate the ability to maintain coherence under pressure, credibility begins to form. This is especially important in transitional economies, where reforms are often tested during periods of stress rather than calm. Investors carefully observe whether coordination holds when challenges arise. Because sustained alignment suggests resilience, the long game acknowledges that trust cannot survive frequent reversals or conflicting messages. Instead, it is built through steady reinforcement of expectations. Over time, clearer institutional behavior allows markets to better understand direction, even when timelines remain uncertain. This reduces speculation and encourages more measured engagement. Iraq's emphasis on alignment suggests an understanding that currency confidence is ultimately collective, not centralized. By strengthening how institutions work together, the currency strategy moves away from dependency on individual actions and toward system-wide reliability. This gradual shift is rarely visible in headlines, but it is one of the most important foundations for long-term stability. Ultimately, the long-term game that lies behind Iraq's currency strategy is mainly characterized by a strategic positioning rather than a calculated predictive approach, and is driven significantly by the preparation rather than pressure element. It appears that the policymakers on the ground understand that attempting to force currency outcomes prior to the underlying economic system being adequately prepared and functioning at its best often results in credibility loss rather than the achievement of increased confidence. Instead, the major focus has been shifted towards creating an environment where there exists an open, future landscape with remaining options and flexible decision-making. In the context of global finance matters, currencies typically end up reflecting the existing trust within the international community long before they do. So in terms of actual value, that trust is constructed and nurtured over time through a consistent approach, maintaining restraint and learning from past mistakes. The Iraq's approach embodies a level of awareness that credibility gradually accumulates and can be undone or revoked if the crucial consistency element is abandoned. For serious investors, it is crucial to recognize that the mindset around currency strategy is not only about a single policy move, but rather the maintaining of continuity over time. A long-term focus on structure, cooperation, and discipline is a clear indication that the Iraq's currency strategy is tightly tied to the ongoing development of its economy, rather than being driven solely by speculative reasons. This is precisely why the global observer's attention remains quiet but steadfast. In the wider context of financial history, the most significant transformations tend to occur when patience prevails over excitement. Taking a look at Iraq's currency strategy through this lens, it seems like it is an ongoing effort to re-establish confidence by gradually building on the existing foundation rather than attempting to force a rapid move in undisciplined fashion. This deliberate, patient approach signals that Iraq is committed to long-term economic evolution rather than being driven by mere speculation.